we're going to review what we've covered in Chapter 10 as we're talking about budgeting. And we were talking about budgets as they can change as our activity levels change. Do you remember that? And how that helps us understand, based on varying activity levels, how we will then have favorable or unfavorable variances. I'm going to wait till everyone's done talking because I'm not going to talk over y'all. So in doing this, the variable aspect of the budgeting, as our production increases, our variable costs are going to increase. And so these flexible budgets are really beneficial for changing our operating plans. So as you can see here with flexible budgets, Barton Robotics has a static budget based on production volume of 10,000 units. And so we show the budgeted and then we show the actual, but it's not really helpful for us because it looks like we're under the variances in all of these aspects. It looks like we didn't do well. However, we actually produced 2,000 more, didn't we? So in a way to avoid this confusion, we start doing what's called a flexible budget. And in doing the flexible budget, we analyze budget data for cost at 10,000 units, and then we're going to analyze data based on variable cost at 12,000 units. When we develop these flexible budgets, we have to identify activities and the relevant range of activities given in certain parameters, because those variable costs are going to change as our activities increase. Usually those fixed costs are going to remain somewhat the same within relevant ranges. So preparing a budget, which is a flexible budget, based on 12,000 units of production, make us look favorable here. Where in the static budget, it made us look unfavorable because we were just comparing 12,000 with 10,000. Yes? Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. One or both? One. Thank you so much. Do you guys remember talking about this from last time? Okay, so Fox Companies Management uses a flexible budget for monthly comparisons of actual and budgeted manufacturing overhead costs of the finishing department. The master budget for the year ending December 31st shows our expected capacity of 120,000 direct labor hours and the following overhead costs. So it gives us our variable cost, and then it gives us all of our fixed costs. 4 steps in developing our budget. We need to know what our activity range is going to be. And then from there, we're going to spell apart or pick apart the variable cost and determine the cost per unit for the activity. So as you can see here, we've got our indirect materials, indirect labor, and our utilities, and we break it down by variable cost per direct labor hour. Now we've got some fixed costs that are going to remain constant. So we're creating a budget, and we're going to have an incremental budget based on 1,000 direct labor hours. So we're going to start at 8,000 labor hours, then we're going to go up to 9,000, 10, and 11,000. And we're creating that budget based on varying levels of activity. It's more useful going this route, guys. So our budgeted costs for Fox Company with fixed cost of 30 and total variable cost of 4,000. For 9,000 direct labor hours, we'd be at 66,000. And for 8622 direct labor hours, we're at 64,488. So this basically is a graph that helps depict our budget information if we're at 10,000 activity levels or a 12,000 activity level, and where our numbers, as you can see here, where the cost shows up for 12,000 labor hours or 10,000 labor hours. A certain amount of them is fixed, and this is the variable aspect that will increase as our hours increase. So, in Strassel flexible budget graph, the fixed cost line and the total budgeted cost line intersect the vertical axis at $36,000. The total budgeted cost line is $186,000 at an activity level of $50,000 here. Compute total budgeted costs at 30,000 labor hours. Again, we're going to show our budgeted cost line, our fixed costs. We've got our variable cost of really $3 per direct labor hour to then come up with our variable costs. And now we know $126,000 will be our total cost at 30,000 direct labor hours. So we, I think, did some problems last week as we are comparing our budgeted to actual and determining our favorable versus unfavorable variances on our variable costs. Let's look at this one, guys. At 9,000 direct labor hours, the flexible budget for indirect materials is 27,000. At if 28,000 of indirect material costs are incurred at 9,200 direct labor hours, the flexible budget report should show the following difference for indirect materials. Will it be unfavorable, favorable, or a $400 favorable or unfavorable? $400 unfavorable. How? Okay, so we would have 9,000, okay, flexible budget at 27,000, which is basically $3 per direct labor hour, okay? Then if we have 9,200, okay, and if we take 9,200 and divide that by 28,000, what would be the difference there? That would, 9,200 times $3 is what? $27,600, and that was our budgeted is $27,600, but we actually incurred $28,000. So we were unfavorable $400 because we went over our budget. So here we've got lawyer company expects to produce 40,000 units of the product. Budgeted variable manufacturing costs are $6 direct materials, $15 direct labor, and overhead of $24. Annual budgeted fixed manufacturing overhead costs are $120,000 for depreciation and $60,000 for supervision. In the current month, lawyer produced 5,000 units and incurred the following costs: direct materials of $33,900, direct labor of $74,200, variable overhead of $125,000, depreciation of $10,000, and supervision of $5,000. We have to project or prepare a flexible budget report. So it tells us $6, $15 direct labor, $24 overhead. And we actually produced, it gave us. So we were unfavorable overall because our direct materials were greater by $3,900 and our overhead was greater by $500. Do you guys see that? the report indicates that the direct labor was only 1% different than the budget, and overhead was less than 0.5%. But the direct materials had a 13% difference. We need to check out why. Okay, so I think the main piece I want to focus on, again, if we go over it in class, it will be on the test. If we don't need to focus on it. I think let's go over a problem here, okay? So, let me pull up the book.
Someone said an attendance sheet?
It was sent. Who hasn't signed it yet? Thank you. Okay. Okie doke, guys, and this is, whoops. We're smart. What page are the problems on? Is it like 300, 450? Okay, exercises. 474. Have we done exercise 10.7? I don't think we did exercise 10.7. Okay, so let's look at exercise 10.7. Kitchen Help Inc. is a manufacturer of toaster ovens. To improve control over operations, the president of Kitchen Help wants to begin using flexible budgeting systems rather than use the only current master budget. Following data are available for KHI's expected cost of production levels at 90,000, 100,000, and 110,000 units. So we've got here variable cost, manufacturing per unit, and then we've got administrative of $4 a unit. We've got selling of $2 a unit, and then we've got fixed cost, manufacturing of $160 and admin of $80. We have to prepare a flexible budget for each of the possible production levels, 90, 100, and 110,000 units. Okay? So it's letting us know the manufacturing variable cost $6, administrative $4, selling $2. Okay? Let me see. So I'll just work on it this way. So we'll start with Kitchen Help Inc. Kitchen Help Inc. And this will be a flexible production cost budget. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have our activity level, production levels at 90,000, 100,000, thank you, and 110. Okay? What are our variable costs going to be? Manufacturing at $6. That's going to be 90,000 at $6 is 540. 100,000 at $6, 600, 110, 660. Then we've got our administrative at $4 at 90,000 units. That administrative at $4 is going to be 360,000, 400,000, and 440. And then finally at selling, $2, 180,000, oops, 200, and 220. So we've got total variable costs. We're going to have 108,000, 1 million here. How about if I put the commas in here? 1,080,000, 1,200,000, and 1,324,000. Now our fixed costs are going to remain the same, aren't they? We've got our manufacturing of 160. And then we've got our administrative 80. Okay? How you guys doing so far? Am I going too fast? Total fixed costs are going to be 240. And our total costs are going to be Can I help? Are you guys getting it? Should I really slow down? This is the kind of problem you're going to have, guys. It's going to be this simple.
So then that's it for flexible budget, just once you get total costs, you're done with it?
Okay? So as we move back here, guys, if KHI sells a toaster oven for $16 each, how many units will it have to sell to make a profit of $200,000 before taxes? So we know all our costs. And it's asking us, if it sells a toaster oven for $16, how many units will it have to sell to make a profit? So let's think of how we're going to do that. So X is going to equal the number of units, okay? The sales price times X is going to equal the variable costs of X plus our fixed costs plus our profit. Now we know that we want a $200 profit. So sales price minus variable costs need to equal, what are our fixed costs? $240, plus we want a profit of $200,000. So our sales price, which is what? 16 bucks, minus our variable costs, which are 12 bucks, right? Equal 440,000. So 4x, or $4 per each unit, has to equal 440,000. X has got to equal how many thousand units? 110,000 units. So do you see how we need to, our fixed costs we know are constant. We know our variable costs are going to be 12 bucks a unit. So if we can calculate our profit per unit, divide that by our total fixed cost and profit, we can calculate how many units we need to sell. This is what I ultimately want you to be able to do on a test. Okay? Should we do the next problem just like this? This is the only thing I want you to focus on this chapter, the important piece of this chapter. Can I change it yet? Okay, this is really what we're talking about here. Let's look at problem 1010. Okay? 1010 tells us that as a sales manager, Joe was given the following static budget for selling expenses in the clothing department for the month of October. So it tells us they budgeted 8,000 units. We actually had 10,000 units. So we're looking at a major unfavorable unfavorable variance. As a result of this budget report, Joe was called into the president's office and congratulated on his fine sales performance. He was reprimanded, however, for allowing his costs to get out of control. Joe knew something was wrong with the performance report that he had been given. However, he wasn't really sure what to do and comes to you for advice. So, guys, what's the problem with this budget? When it's a static budget, it doesn't take into account changes for volume, does it? Does that make sense? So, we need to prepare a budget report based on flexible budget data to help Joe. So, do you see how this budget data is at 8,000 units, but he actually sold 10,000 units. So what are we going to do to change this? We have got to come up with new budgeted figures based on 10,000 units. If we budgeted 8,000 and we had sales commissions of 2,400, how much are we taking into account the sales commission is per unit? $0.30? If we show advertising expenses of $720, divide that by 8,000 units, what is that? How many cents per unit is that? 9 cents. Travel expenses, 3,600 divided by 8,000 units is how much? 45 cents. And free samples given out, how much is that? 20 cents. Do you see, guys, we can do a flexible budget as long as we know those variable costs, we can put in place a flexible budget. So if we do that, let's look here. If we show Soraya Company selling expense flexible budget report, clothing department, and this is October 31st, 14. So we're going to show sales in units. We're going to show sales in units, and we're going to have a budget favorable or unfavorable. So we're going to show this sales in units of a budget of 10 and an actual of 10. Okay?
So we're budgeting the 10,000 and not the 8,000 that he did.
Exactly. Okay, whoops. C5 minus D5. So we're going to do the same thing with our various costs. So our variable expenses, we've got sales commissions, of 30 cents. And how will what is 10,000 budgeted units at 30 cents is 3,000 bucks. What did we actually spend? What does it show our actual is? It says our actual is 2,600, didn't it? So our actual expense is at 2,600. So we have a favorable variance of 400 units there, or $400. Our next is advertising expense of 9 cents a unit. This would be 900 bucks. We actually spent $850, so we've got another favorable. Our travel expense at 45 cents a unit, 4,500, but we actually spent 4,100, so we've got another favorable. How about our free samples? Free samples at 20 cents a unit. So 2,000 bucks, 1,400 bucks, got another favorable. So ultimately, guys, do you see our total variable expenses? Total variable expenses really amount to $1.04 per unit. And we are favorable here, $1,450. Now our fixed costs are on rent. Our rent is $1,500. Our the next one we have is sales salaries. Sales salaries of $1,200. The next we have what? office salaries of 800. And then we have some depreciation, sale, staff, autos. So our total fixed expenses here got it? And our total cost come up to 14,400, but our actual costs are 12,950. So we've got that variable favorable overhead. Now guys, it asks us, should Joe have been reprimanded?
No.
No. Do you guys understand, because the actual activity increased, he really was under budgeted on all those items? Okay? Do you guys want the problem you're going to have for your test? Would you guys like that? Okay. So let me get that for you. Does that help? Okay. Okay. Okay, let me pull it up here, and then you're good. So, your question for the problem whoops. Strickland Corporation's manufacturing overhead budget for the first quarter of 2013 contained all these variable costs. So we've got variable costs, indirect materials of $40,000, indirect labor of $24,000, utilities of $20,000, maintenance of $12,000. Then they give us supervisor's salary of $80,000, depreciation of $16,000, property taxes of $8,000. But the actual variable costs for the first quarter were the indirect materials of $37,200, the indirect labor of $26,400, and the utilities of $21,000, along with maintenance of $10,600. Actual fixed costs were as expected, except for property taxes, which were $9,000. All costs are considered controllable by the department manager except for the supervisor's salary. So our job, it helps to give you what the job is. You're supposed to prepare a manufacturing overhead responsibility performance report. So prepare a manufacturing overhead responsibility performance report for the first quarter. And this is going to show you the favorable or unfavorable. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Are y'all good with this?